back to the Two Mortgage Guys podcast. We're extremely excited to have you with us this week. A decently wonderful topic that's going to come up is going to be just kind of surrounding healthcare and this, but we're going to be covering all kinds of things because if you know my next guest, she's in all kinds of things. Her name's Ashlee Collins. She's got her hand in seemingly everything and somehow does it all well. She's the hostess with the mostest. She's also the craziest with the craziest because she's able to keep up with all of them, and she does it all with a lot of elegance and grace. So please welcome to the show my friend Ashlee Collins.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're so stoked to have you on the show. I know this has been tough making it happen with your schedule and my schedule.
I know. You know, it's like I got to keep pushing things back, but, you know, eventually you just got to, all right, let's get this.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you're doing amazing work in the medical field with people, and that is definitely more important. And especially with all the stuff going on with COVID and the challenges that are rising with this world, it's going to keep you busy. Let's be honest.
You know, I got to say, like, healthcare is definitely proven to be one of those, and it just never shuts down. And unlike many people, I've never worked from home during all of this. Actually, no, I did work from home for 3 days, and I ended up repainting my kitchen cabinets, so they told me to come back. Because I was like, what am I going to do with myself? I can't sit at home. I'm going to find a project. But it's really been like a whirlwind past 2 years. It's gone by so fast, and it continues to, and as things change and evolve and hopefully come back to normal, we can kind of get back into some normal stuff. I love planning in-person events again. So super excited for the year ahead. So
just to help you guys understand what we mean by her being busy, if you think it's busy marketing for any organization by itself, imagine marketing for both the Inland Valley Hospital and Rancho Springs, which are both formidable hospitals in our area.
Yes.
And trying to keep up with all of that with you and one other gentleman, I believe, are the only ones that are really co-heading this department, right?
There's myself as the marketing manager and Brian Connors is the marketing director. So we're a two-man team. We're small but mighty. Yeah,
you are. But you got to be mighty to handle that much traction. It's crazy.
I have a little name tag on my desk, Chief Chaos Officer, and it feels like that, you know. So like this week, I've just feel very like a ping pong, bing, 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 all over the place. So, but I love it. And, you know, as long as they want me back, then I'm going to keep going.
Well, I think it's a really fun take on marketing, if you don't mind me kind of switching to that real quick, because we've had a lot of people in here, including friends that we mutually share. And a lot of us are kind of in that department, at least to a degree, because if we're entrepreneurs, we have to do it, right?
Yeah.
But not many people think about, I think we talked about this on the phone a little bit the other day, the fact that hospitals need marketing. Because the reality is, how do you know that hospital is going to have the care you need or the supplies or the staff or, you know, what it's good at or, you know, what they're trying to attempt to do?
Right. Well, and who even thinks about that?
Right.
You know, so a lot of people ask me, how do you market a hospital? And it's a very good question when you don't know, but when you're in it, each facility has its own special service lines.
Right.
So like Rancho Springs, Family Birth Center, moms and babies. We have close to 300 babies a month in there. Well, we also have competitors nearby with Loma Linda. So how do we make ourselves stand out above competitors so that women want to come to our facility and have their babies there? Well, we also have a robotics program. At Inland, we have a level 2 trauma center. We have the total joint program. So your hips and knees and shoulder surgeries are happening there. We got a bariatric weight loss program there. So there's certain service lines at each facility. So you have to be able to market each of those service lines in different ways because each has a different audience.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of strategy that goes behind that because ultimately you're trying to increase volume. Like surgeries are our bread and butter. Like, you know, we have our emergency departments at both facilities. And of course, everybody is going to come to, you know, the emergency. I think we get upwards of 100,000 visitors per year. And when COVID hit, a lot of people were afraid to come to the hospital because the perception is that the hospital means I'm going to get COVID or be exposed to it, which was not the case. The hospital is probably one of the safest places to be. But yeah, I mean, we saw people delaying heart attacks, strokes, like really delaying care. And so that's a part of marketing too, because we had to reach out to that audience to kind of combat the fear of coming to the hospital. So And then once things start opening back up and elective surgeries can happen again, we want to target, those people that are going to need those. A lot of times at hospital, you don't know you need it till you need it.
Sure.
But if you know you have a hip surgery coming up, you have options for where you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So marketing goes into that so that we're top of mind.
Yeah. So how long have you been in this role?
I've been with Southwest, it'll be 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
This month. So.
Oh, yeah. Happy anniversary.
Yeah, January 9th. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to go into that because, I mean, I've lived in this area for forever. So Rancho Springs has been around since Inland Valley. Mm-hmm. They were like the two major staples before Temecula Valley Hospital got here and stuff. And Loma Linda now added to that. And it is interesting because when Rancho first started, I mean, NICU babies, that was not what we thought of, right? And
no.
The reason it hits home for me now is, my nephew was born through Rancho's NICU. And they literally saved my sister's life. Like, she had preeclampsia and all this stuff going on. Mm-hmm. We didn't realize how bad it was. She got into a doctor's office. They said, you got to go now. They got her in, and literally, I mean, his and her life saved, and he was born 2 months premature. Mm-hmm. So that being said, your role is important because I know that you don't get lost in this. I mean, I hear the way you talk about the people that you care about that go to it, but people need to understand, like, this kind of marketing, it's not just like I need to make dollars and cents or some sort of commission. This is the difference between somebody getting in and taken care of in the amount of time that they need to be taken care of.
Quality care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Healthcare quality is really one of the target things that we focus on, patient experience and quality healthcare. Mm-hmm. When it comes to those services being offered, the more we grow, the more things that we can offer that'll prevent you from being transferred either to San Diego. Because before, when my son was born in 2009, he had to go to the NICU and he had to be transferred. So I went home without my first child for a week. I mean, I got to go down and see him down at Rady Children's, but now Rady Children's is partnered with Rancho Springs. So
which I think is
our
awesome.
NICU is staffed with all Rady physicians, which is awesome. And we have pediatric emergency services, so any child up to 18 can come in and be seen by Rady staff in our emergency room.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, this kind of stuff resonates with me. And I mean, right now I'm sticking kind of on the pediatric road, but we're going to take some jumps here. But I mean, when I was in high school, we discovered a bunch of issues with my knees. Mm-hmm. Had to take a bunch of knee surgeries. Mm-hmm. So I was effectively in the children's hospital because it was before 18. Yeah. And going through all that with proper care was something that I took for granted a little bit at that age, but definitely still appreciated. Mm-hmm. And then the older I've gotten, the more I'm like, man, like, there are some really incredible facilities out there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important for people to know because I think sometimes we get so stuck in our grind. I mean, you and I are epitome of this because we're so busy. Yeah. But the reality is, like, we don't have the time necessarily to always find a way to Google and research what the best option is should our kid end up in this predicament. Yeah. But the reality is if people like you are doing their job, all of a sudden that's already out there. People don't know necessarily where they found it or where they heard it, but they knew.
It's top of mind. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, like, for when we were having my kids, like, we're like, shoot, well, we know Rancho Springs is a solid option because of the NICU and what they did for my sister, and we had already seen like billboards and things up about it and all that stuff, and that's a big thing to kind of have that nurturing, like, here, we're here for you, just to remind you that we're still here, so that you're doing your job.
Yeah, and those things are very important, even certifications that we get or distinctions that we earn, Joint Commission coming in, surveys, all those are really important when it comes to patient experience and quality care. So it's very busy. I love what I do. Every day is different. So whether I'm, strategizing with Brian over how we're going to promote a certain service line, or we're planning a community event, or I'm, doing a Facebook Live, which I'm starting up my new series where I actually am doing a Facebook Live with 2 nurses up in our family birth center.
That's awesome.
I have labor and delivery and postpartum, and they will answer questions live. So that'll be a whole new series this year.
Phenomenal.
Super excited about that on our Rancho Springs Facebook page. And those things, those are all parts of marketing. And I come from a public relations and communications education. So the whole PR, the perception is really in my realm. And Brian is fabulous at advertising. Like he is like an advertiser for sure, marketer, advertiser. So the combination makes the dream team, as we call it. Sure. And then you add our development team and our physician relations, who really gets in with the physicians in the area and building those relationships between the physicians and the facility. That's a whole nother area of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of stuff going on, but I love it. It's exciting. Never a dull moment.
No, no, and well, I mean, you add to that you're a mother and that you're plugged into the Temecula Chamber and the Valley Young Professionals and
right.
all of that fun stuff that you decided to add to your hat.
Yeah, and it's funny because my husband's not around very much. He works for CAL FIRE, and he keeps building in his specialties, so that keeps him away more. But I have 2 kids. I have a 12-year-old son and a 4-year-old son. So boys, woohoo!
Hey,
boy, mom.
me too.
And I love it. I mean, it's what I'm used to.
Sure.
So having them, and then I just finished my second graduate program in August. So school, kids, work, COVID. It's been a wild ride. I don't know how I've gotten through it. A little psycho sometimes, probably a lot of wine. like mommy just needs a break. But yeah, it's I don't know how to slow down.
Sure.
So, and I'm okay with it. Some people can't keep up. My husband drives me crazy. He just wants to come home and do nothing. And I'm like, come on, let's go. And he's like, I don't want any schedules right now.
That's awesome.
But I got plans, man. So
yeah, I got places to go.
I got
people
places
to see.
go. And I'm like, okay, well then you stay home. I'm going to go. Here's the kids.
Here's the kids.
Sorry.
But I mean, that's why when you're able to be successful, what you do, because like I said, what you and Brian do is, in my opinion, more than a 2-man team. Worth of work. But you got somebody like yourself who can run around 4 people at one time, so it kind of works out. You're able to pull the job off, which, I mean, when you think about the fact that, I've got a lot of friends in the medical, we've talked about this, and it's hard running a hospital. The budget that's there, the nuances to have the proper amount of technology and staff and labor all balanced out is rough, and I'm sure they're very happy to have a marketing team that is spread thin and still effective.
I think they're pretty happy. I have a great leadership team. They're very they encourage and they give us the creative freedom to do these creative things, and that's what I love most about them. Brian and I are rarely stifled by the word no. Which is good because the word no is a major challenge for me. You're going to tell me no? Okay, I'm going to figure out how. So
doesn't sound like you at all.
I know, right? So I don't handle no very well. But we're able to really present things to them, and they're like, yeah, go with it. And that kind of support in our leadership is really kind of what makes us so successful in what we do. And plus, before coming to Southwest, I worked for a nonprofit for 4 years. You play many hats and many roles in a nonprofit because of the same reason, for budgetary. One is nonprofit trying to earn the money, one's for profit, and they're like, hammer down on your finances. So it's a little different, but still the same thing. I mean, you got to really bring different roles into your role and play them all and look like, kind of that duck on the water. My feet may be going like this, but I'm pretty calm on this.
Yeah, if we're going to name this episode right now, James, I'm already thinking about it. Yeah. It's going to be duck on the water because that's Ashlee 100%. She's always like this up top, but then below it's
like, it wasn't on my calendar.
Yeah.
That's just my go-to. Sorry, it wasn't on my calendar.
Yeah. But, so I'm going to touch base on something because if I don't, we're going to go way too far past it. But so you just talked about how you were part of a nonprofit that was Jacob's House, correct?
No, Michelle's Place.
Michelle's Place, yeah. I'm sorry. Somebody's place. So Michelle's Place.
There's a lot of them.
There are. And honestly, they're both great. So definitely don't want to downplay either. But I kind of wanted to follow our little yellow brick road to how you got where you're at now. Because I know that we've talked and you said you spent about 10 years in modeling, right? Mm-hmm. And then you went from there to Boise State to finish your education. And then education from there, is that when you went down to Michelle's Place? Or did you go... After
I graduated my undergraduate, I got my bachelor's in communication and public relations. But yeah, right out of high school, I went through an angry, rebellious phase because my parents had just moved to California from Northern Virginia. And that was my home. I loved it there. And all of a sudden, I'm in this California, SoCal, what? And that's when I got recruited to do modeling stuff, and I had all this stuff going on. And that's really kind of the age when a lot of that can happen because you're like, what do my parents know? I can do whatever I want. I'm invincible. You quickly learn that that's not true.
Of course.
But the 20s, that's when I made my mistakes. And that's also when I really had to kind of face my crossroads. When I was 26, I found out I was going to have my son. And I'm like, well, shoot, what am I going to do with myself? I got to go to school and do something. And then I remember somebody telling me that that my generation would not surpass my parents' generation, which is the baby boomers, like as far as, you know, money and earning and pay.
Right.
I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. So so I went to Boise State. I just wanted a break from the area for a little while. And so we moved to Idaho, which was really nice area. Now it's like booming and, you know, everybody's moving there. It's like the new Temecula. But I loved the college experience, being on campus. Right. You know, all my classes were there. Now, granted, all the kids were like 10 years younger than me, but that's okay.
That's right. You were energetic enough for all of them.
That's right. You know, and I was always in the front row, like, I know the answers. My husband's like, you're that girl I hated in school. Like, I'm like, all right, whatever. But I was soaking it all in.
Sure.
You know, and I'm glad I had that experience, because then I moved to Northern California for a short time, and that's when I had my first job out of college that was terrible. Like, you hear those sayings, you know, your first job is horrible. This one was really horrible.
Okay.
But it was in a marketing agency, and I'm glad that I had that experience. It's like I can see the road that God took me down when I go back and I look at it.
Amen to that.
It was a husband and wife team that ran the company, and they argued all the time. We were always getting cut down and, you know, talked down to by the boss. Turns out later that she was embezzling from her clients. So we, you know, later on I see like why that was happening. But that's where I learned how to do graphic design, because we were editing things and getting them done. And I really had to, like, you know, be like a little ping pong all over the place, ordering stuff and designing stuff and making sure that things were done. But I remember going home and crying like, Mom, I can't handle this person, because it was like abusive almost. But it was my first job, and I didn't want to just call it quits. Understood. You know. And my husband was, you know, I mean, he's doing his fire thing, and so I just felt like me and my son were just alone. And I started looking for jobs in Temecula, because my parents still own their home here. They actually moved to Idaho with me and bought a house so that I didn't have to work and do school.
Well, that's pretty awesome parents.
They're pretty amazing. They watch my kids every day. I don't know what I would do without them. So yeah, then they ended up moving back into their home, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go back to Temecula. And I was looking for jobs. I couldn't find a thing. And then I looked in Craigslist, which all you ever see Craigslist and PR is like sign spinners.
Yeah.
And I was like on a whim, and then communications director, boom, Michelle's place. And I'm like, that's my job. And I literally said that in my email. This is my job. Look at my resume. So yeah, awesome. Flew down here, did the interview, and got it.
So I was kind of hoping that, and I wasn't fully sure how it would look, but I was kind of hoping you would describe your journey similar to what you did. So something that's been really fun for me in the last few interviews, I know we talked about how some mutual friends of yours have been on here, Jonathan Montanez, Sebastian Seedy, Carly Uriki, you know, some really phenomenal professionals in our area. And you know, we've had a chance to kind of level between the two of us, like whoever's on the other side of the table, that, you know, getting to where we're at now was colorful, to say the least, right? You know, I mean, the challenges, the ups, the downs, the failing forward, the moments where you just think you're done and you're cooked and you're ready to scream.
And I've had many of those moments.
Yeah.
Because before I went to college, my life was extremely colorful, to say the least. I mean, I have pictures of me at a rave in a rainbow bright shirt with beads all the way up to here, and the necklace and the pacifier and jeans with light sticks down. I'm like,
like a human peacock.
Oh my, yeah. It was crazy. But at the time, like, that's, you know, what I was into, and it wasn't the healthiest lifestyle for sure. I made a lot of mistakes. I did, you know, things that today, like, if people would be like, oh my, are you serious?
Right.
And I had to learn some really harsh lessons, and I used to convince myself that I would never amount to anything, because who's going to hire me, you know, now? Right. And now I'm a single mom with my son. And so a lot of it, I was psyching myself out, and I was living back with my parents so that I could go to school. And so where is my life going? Yeah. In many ways, that was my fear. And I had to really go out on a whim and just have faith and take those chances. And God really laid it out for me, like the opportunities that I have, and I see why he took me down that path to get to where I'm at today. And I've learned I don't have to be afraid of my past or any, because you know what? I am who I am now because of it.
Yeah.
I don't have to be afraid to try, because if you don't ask, it's a no, is kind of my saying. So if you don't try, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And now I want my boys to have that same mentality, you know?
Sure.
So, because like I said to you, you know, when you're content with something, that's when you die. So like I can't, it drives my husband nuts. He's like, can't you just be content after, because I'm always going to the next thing. And it's like a challenge. Okay, well, I accomplished that. Now what am I on to? My husband just wants me to relax. Like, can we just like simmer down now and be content? I don't know how to do that.
Sure.
But I feel like once I become content, then I'm done, you know? Well, I don't know how to sit.
I laughed at that terminology yesterday because it just made me laugh to think, like, you can't be content or you're going to die. Like,
yeah, you're going to die.
That's just not something you hear. That's not your Hallmark card of today, right?
No.
And so my argument, slight tweaking of that would be, if you become complacent, you die.
Okay. And that's a much better word.
And that's where I go, because I know you knew that, because content, it's not like you're like death to happiness, because, you know, like, you're not that kind of person.
I'm content.
Yeah, exactly. I'm content. Something's bad. I can't be happy. That's not where we're going with this. And that's kind of the point of what I wanted people to hear your journey is, it wasn't about the fact that you weren't content. It was the fact that you weren't complacent.
Yeah.
And the fact that you would never let your duck feet stop moving.
Yeah.
And that sounds like I'm really describing
you horribly,
by the way. Like when I said your duck feet, because you don't have duck feet.
I probably do.
I don't think you do. Anyways, then again, all I have seen is your shoes. So who knows? But where we're going with it is we have the whole point of this thing is, right, to illuminate your guys' business, but also to help people that are in small business to kind of see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in small business, the more that I'm listening to them, and entrepreneurs even, and especially people who have never had either of those opportunities, are so afraid of what the waste may look like when they have to make those changes. And here's the reality. Do we want to avoid mistakes and be cautious and make wise choices? Of course.
Of course.
The reality is we're imperfect. Imperfect creatures in need of saving. And if we, you know, in the middle of that, while we're figuring out who our Messiah is, the rest of it is okay, so I made these mistakes. How do I make the best out of that? And that's what you've done, seemingly. I mean, based on your whole description, it was like, well, this worked out great, but no. And then this, but no. But I'm not going to forget everything I was. I'm going to take that and let it become a complete picture of who I am today.
And I really made it into a positive, you know. I used to dwell in the negative, but it's like, then that's where you live. And I don't like to live in I love to laugh and be happy and be positive, because you know what, at the end of the day, I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. My children are healthy. Life is good, and I'm thankful. So in a lot of ways, I am content with that, but I always am aspiring for the next thing.
Right.
Because first, I'm too ADD to just sit and be like, oh, okay. But there's always something new to aspire to.
Sure.
So I always say that I was a forever student because I was in school for so long. But now that I finished my second MBA, I'm like, okay, well, what's next? So there's different, you know, steps and things that I want to do. Well,
and you're proving that you don't have to go to college to be a student. You're a student of life.
Right. And you don't have to be afraid that who you were prior to even trying is going to hold you back. Because if I lived that way, I wouldn't be anywhere today. Yeah. You know, and so there's things that are gonna fail in life. You're gonna fail, you're gonna do horrible at, or you're gonna be embarrassed about. But a lot of it, you have to push past it, because those things are what build you into a better person. Sure. So if you don't look at it that way and take that for what it is and build upon it, then you could really dwell in that negative forever. Yeah.
And I think that's also because we get lost in terminology in our culture, society even. I was actually just at lunch with a friend the other day, and I said, you know, I get tired of people's descriptions, not because, like, I'm not like one of the fluffy people today who can't handle being called something. That's not where I'm going with that. I mean, there's plenty of woke issues we can talk about another day. But for me, it's more like, my whole life I've been described as happy-go-lucky and positive. Totally meant as compliments, and they are, and I get it. That's great. But I think the reason I have a hard time with that is usually when people describe me that way, they're describing me a little bit as unrealistic as well.
Ooh, yeah.
Because they tend to see that as, well, if you're positive, it's because you also don't see the negative. Excuse me. I've lived way too much of this life already to have not seen negative go on, right? Right. So what the reality is that's different, and this is what I was trying to describe to my friend, is I would just call myself somebody who has hope. Yeah. Because I believe at the center of positivity is hope, and I believe it's realistic. Because hope is built on something that you've seen happened before you. It's like faith, right?
Yeah.
And then that's why they work together. And for me, I have so much hope in the way that God's determined my life, as you were talking about, and also in the way that things outcome, that if you take things for where they're at and you build on them, then your hope is that it will become this. And I don't think that's unrealistic at all. I think that's just the nature of how things work.
Yeah, because without hope, I mean, what is there?
Exactly. And there's a really interesting study, and I'm sure I'm going to misquote the story to some degree, so please, somebody at home who has a scientific, book or whatever, please beat me with it later. But the reality was there was a study done with some rats that were in a pot of water, and they let them swim for a couple hours, and just the study was to see how long they could swim before they die. And essentially, they lasted 2 to 3 hours. A wonderful study.
Some strong swimmers.
Yeah, really nice, and great to watch something suffer until it dies.
Right,
but
for 2 hours.
Wonderful, yeah. And so they finally they figure out that it's dead and all this stuff to pull them out. Well, they bring a whole other set of rats in, and they do the same thing. So about halfway through, they pull them out, and then they let them rest. They put them back in. Now they want to see how long they can last.
Stamina, because they have hope.
But now they have hope. Yeah. 23 hours later, they're still swimming.
What?
When you have hope, things change.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the reality. Is they said, well. The rats knew in their head something could pull me out.
Yeah.
There was actually a hope of it before. And I think when you've gone through the changes that you've gone through, changing with school, through your modeling, through the horrible job that you experienced, something kept pulling you out. So there was always hope. And I think that's kind of what makes you excited about living life the way that you do.
Well, yeah.
And because there's always hope there's something better and more fun to learn or whatever.
Well, and I've seen some pretty deep, dark things that nobody should really see or experience, unfortunately, and I've seen that side of life, and obviously where I'm at now, huge difference. But it's when you come from that, it gives me a different perspective. I came from your all-American family. My dad's a retired Marine. We've lived kind of all over the place, military lifestyle. My mom became a nurse after being a single mom, with us, and she's a nurse practitioner now. So I had a great growing up. I had a great childhood. I have 2 brothers, one older, one younger. Childhood was great. And then I entered that rebellious phase. I kind of say I had affluenza because I was so entitled and, this spoiled brat because I'm, daddy's only daughter. And I rebelled against my mother. It's just weird how that happened when I grew up in such a great family.
Sure.
I grew up going to church and was very involved in that. And yeah, it's like I went off the deep end when we moved to California. God, it's all California's fault.
I can't necessarily argue with that nowadays.
But it's I kind of went, in this very selfish and I was entitled and invincible and nothing can touch me and I see a lot now. A lot of the next generation has that mentality when we really shouldn't feel entitled to anything because we're not, right. Everything is a privilege. It's not a right.
Amen.
And I used to steal the car that my parents had or my brother's car. And my parents just were besides themselves, your ability to drive is not a right. It's a privilege. And so that mindset I feel like has been lost in, in the next generations. And so there's a lot of, it's a society of feelings. Everybody's got, hurt feelings or, they want to talk about how they feel. Well, nobody has to care about how you feel. And I've learned that harsh lesson.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to be accountable to yourself and responsible for yourself and your own actions, So I'm really trying to instill that in my boys. It's really hard with my son in 7th grade. 7th grade is a nightmare to me. That's the grade when I struggled the most. You're awkward. You have braces and, glasses and you're just not.
Your body's changing. You're trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, you're not your best self. Kids are mean.
It's tough.
So now trying to navigate it from that end and try to show him love and build up his self-esteem. It's hard from this perspective, but I've been down roads that typically lead to death, addiction, or destruction.
Yeah.
And I've come out of it, and I'm thankful for that every day. I'm thankful to my parents for never giving up on me. I'm thankful for my oldest son for, he saved my life. And that's kind of how I see it. So now I live life thankful for all that I'm given. And I don't take it for granted anymore.
Well, I think that, not to get too psychoanalytical about yourself, but I think that's a little bit of why you operate the way that you do, because someone who's experienced all the wrong roads, as you kind of put it for yourself, starts to appreciate all the right ones a lot more.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would I hold still when there's so much more I could see that I'm blessed to still be able to see.
Yeah.
And so I respect that in that sense. I mean, obviously, I think at some point you're gonna have to listen to your husband and relax a little bit. A little.
Nah, maybe.
A little.
Maybe in like 10 years.
Okay. We'll talk from 10 years from now on the podcast and see how you're doing. But the idea that you're kind of living in a vivacious form of life that's doing it because you appreciate life is a big deal. And I do agree with you. I think that we've made a lot, as the upbringing, the way that people have been abroad is so different. I mean,
oh yeah.
I remember, the stories that you hear from your parents and the way things that were grasped back then is just very different. And I don't think people our generation really want to accept that or understand it. But the reality is when you have a lot already, it's really easy to take that for granted.
Oh, for sure.
And become, like you said, entitled, spoiled, and those things bring about their own consequences. And it brings back rebellions, being a rebellious person. It makes you unequipped to face a world that's very not going to care about you.
Yeah.
I remember, as you know, my background was in food prior to this. I used to manage for In-N-Out Burger and for Chick-fil-A and stuff. And, I used to deal with a lot of young people because of that, because it's, their first jobs, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
that must have been fun.
Oh, yeah. The best. My favorite part of my job. But, it's funny. I just sometimes a couple parents would come in and be a little bit more concerned about their kids. And it was kind of cute because, it wasn't school, but they're still trying to figure out ways to ask how the kid was doing at their job. And, one of them actually had kind of a troubled kid because they were entitled brat. And I said, I don't mean to sound rude when I say this, but the hardest part of my job is when I'm the first person to tell this person in the world no. Because when they've never been told no before, you failed your child in equipping them for what the world's really going to teach them.
Absolutely.
And that person kind of broke, but they were thankful. We talked for a while, and I was like, look, I'm not saying you're a bad person or a bad parent. You probably cared, but you didn't realize that by only giving them what they wanted, you hurt them, because now they don't want to do anything that's going to get them in real life.
And they don't appreciate the things that they have. They're constantly wanting more.
Exactly.
And the material, wanting more. I'm dealing with that with my children, because for me, it's hard not to spoil them, but at the same time, I know what that leads to.
Sure.
My husband's even more, strict with that than I am, but he's not around a whole lot.
Yeah.
And my dad, love my dad to death because he loves my children and buys them everything. So, but it backfires on me, because, Papa will get it for, don't, because I said, no, you can't go to Papa and ask him for it, because my oldest will have that mentality. And so my mom and I always tell my dad, you have to tell him no every once in a while. And he's like, I'm the grandpa, I don't have to. I get that, but you're with them every day. It's not like you're going over there to see them, after you haven't seen them for a long time. So there's a fine line of being a disciplinarian to my kids and telling them no, and me, wanting them to have things that make them happy. But you gotta balance that. Otherwise,
absolutely, because
I've never experienced with my youngest anyway, my 4-year-old, him crying in a store or throwing a fit because he can't have something. Granted, I do buy him little things every once, but bringing toys in for him will prevent that. Because no, you got this little guy. So I don't want my children to think they can always have something at every single time.
Well, I mean, here's the reality of the situation. You look at the world, most kids don't have anything, and they're still finding a way to be happy. And so
they're the happiest sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Because they appreciate life in a different way. And that's the reality that we have to accept as parents is, well, it's totally okay and totally normal to want to bless them with those things.
Yeah.
You don't want to cripple them with them either.
Exactly.
And so the reality that we need to understand is where they're happiest is when they've been given healthy boundaries. They have present parents, and they're being taken care of their needs, not their wants. The wants can come later than come in any amount, but if those other things are taken care of, you're going to have a happy kid anyways. But are you going to have a thankful kid or an entitled kid?
Yeah. And really always being present. Sometimes it's pulling teeth out of my son to find out things that happened in school that day. But I genuinely want to, for his own welfare and mental health, well-being, what happened? How did you feel? How did it make you feel? How can I help you in these areas? So, I mean, all of that, now it's funny as a parent role, kind of revisiting from a perspective that I've already lived. Because, I don't want my kids to ever follow that destructive path.
Yeah.
I mean, they're boys. Like, I don't know if they can come out of it like I did.
Well, I think it's important that you recognize that, because a lot of parents make the mistake of, well, I made it, and they think like that's part of life, and the kid's got to learn the same way. Like, no, you should learn that what you learned was the wrong way, and you got to save other people from making the same mistake.
Yeah, I'm just very fortunate that I was, able to get out of it and make something of myself.
You accepted the grace extended it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
and honestly...
on my knees.
Yeah. Well, and kind of full circle this real quick. If there was anybody else that I'd want involved in my medical care, it would be somebody like yourself. Because I want somebody that understands the fullness of life, that understands the value of it, understands the need to take care of it, but also has such a hustle in her because she's not entitled, that she's going to take care of something that potentially could save my family.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what makes you like the fit for the job is, again, all of those tools, all those things that you had walking up to this moment, all these things that made you who you are, you're taking those things and you're forming them into an overall product of, this is how I'm going to help people find what they need to find in the medical world.
Well, and it's really about, because healthcare is very emotional. It's personal.
Right.
People, don't come and be like, oh, yay, this nurse, is... A lot of times it's negative comments that we get, about certain things, but you got to understand it's from their perception that is not always based on reality.
Absolutely.
So sometimes things happen and they're going to convince themselves that, that nurse is ignoring them or they're not answering first, but that's not the case. A lot of times the nurses are tending to something and can't get to it. And, and it's, you want to come at people in the community from their perception. Right. I need to think how they're thinking so that I know how to market to myself.
Right.
So I need to know how the mom of, several children is thinking. I need to know how, the older couple, we got to have surgeries are thinking. You got to think from the outside in. Yeah. And there's a real human element to healthcare when you look at everybody involved. Like, it's not just a nurse or a doctor or, a radiologist or imaging technician. They're real people that live real lives and they have real feelings. And so a lot of it is bringing that human element to the community while also thinking how the community feels.
No, 100%. When you personalize things, all of a sudden you automatically start educating an audience in a way that's really important because, like you said, they start understanding how things work. They don't feel neglected necessarily. They're more patient. They're more willing to go the extra mile for certain things. Yeah. It's really important to have that aspect. And I mean, like I said, I've got my best friend in life, my brother from another mother. I mean, I would say that too because he's a tall, giant, blonde dude that just totally different built me in every way. He's a nurse, and the stories he comes home with, and I'm like, people throwing feces at him and just going and yelling and screaming from the time they walk in, and they never even met him. And if I mean, I'm not just defending him because he's my best friend. Literally the nicest person on planet Earth.
And that doesn't even matter because
it doesn't matter.
There's a perception already built.
Exactly.
In that person's mind. And I don't know how a lot of our frontline workers do it. I don't because I'm not in direct medical care. My mother's a nurse practitioner. She has that nurturing spirit. And but I went to all career days with my mom in the ICU and I'm like, nope, I'm not doing direct care. I'm not going to I'm not dealing with that. But I do the business side of it, but I love it.
Yeah, well, that's what makes you effective at it though, because you're humanizing it because you've seen what it's like for others. And instead of being somebody that this is the problem with a lot of our world today. I used to tell this to a lot of my kids who used to work for me and be like, look, I have no problem if you have problems and you don't like the way something's happening on the shift. But you always got to come with a solution. That's how we're going to keep this from being...
With respect.
Exactly. From being a whining situation. Because if you have to come up with a solution, then you have to start understand the perspective switch of what I have to do. And sure enough, that got them engaged. It was much better conversations. And I think people just in general have gotten so focused on themselves that they forgot at all to even consider looking in somebody else's shoes.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, my friend is literally the nicest person in the world, and he will bend over backwards to do anything you ask him, even when you're throwing feces at him. So imagine how much more he's going to do when you're being nice to him.
Well, know? I mean, they take the brunt of things, and it's I see how hard they work, and especially these days, everybody's short-staffed, and then when there's still a job to do and tend to these patients, and to a patient, they're the only ones there. There's not all these other things going on. Yeah. And it's so easy to get mad at, the healthcare provider coming in because you're like, well, you're not tending to my feelings because it's really all about them in that moment. And, I get it. When you're in the hospital, it's not a fun place to be.
No.
But yeah, I mean, these nurses and these healthcare workers, man, they can really take a lot, and they still genuinely care about the quality of care this person is receiving. So,
and you're helping provide the information for people to be able to do that more easily. So, without being able to open another can that you and I could go on for another 2 hours.
I know we could. I mean, we're expanding. We got things happening.
We got philosophical.
There's so much. I know.
We went into child raising. Who would have thought?
I know. I feel like Aristotle, Socrates. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
we're digging deep.
We are. We had more than a shovel. We had like a cat, one of those cat diggers, whatever they're called.
Yeah, stay tuned for another part 2.
Yeah, it'll be there, and I would hope so anyways. And guys, anyone listening today, obviously you can tell why she's on the show. You can tell that she's a professional. She knows what the heck she's doing. She's doing a tremendous service for our community out here in the Inland Valley, taking care of medical professionals and making their work known, their services known, and getting it not only to the people that need to use it, but giving education and whatnot to the people that work under that umbrella. And we didn't even touch that heavily on that today. Another time, we'll get there.
Another time.
But all that to say, guys, I really hope you got to be blessed by this today, because you got to hear someone that is you. And I mean that from the whole, definition of that. Someone who's seen it from your shoes, that's been at the bottom of the barrel, that's been at the top of the cup, has seen everything that you can imagine, but still chugged along and realized life is wonderful, life is beautiful. Let's make something of it.
Keep on chugging, man. Just keep
That's
swimming.
Right.
Keep swimming.
That duck paddle is real life right now.
Just keep swimming.
I'm seriously, I'm going to end up calling you duck in public or something. But I promise I'm going to do it in a tasteful way. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I'm going to start pointing like this all over the screen like I always do to James to make him work, so that way you start putting links all over the screen. But everything that you heard referenced today, anything that she brought up as far as Rancho Springs or Inland Valley, any other programs that may have links, we will make sure that we provide that for you. It'll either be at the bottom of the YouTube link or somewhere on the Spotify account. So it's going to be easy for you to find, and you'll be able to get way more information on all of this stuff. And we'll have contact information, like general emails and stuff that you can reach out to her for, and maybe get some information that way. Ashlee, we cannot thank you enough for being on our episode.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
I'm glad you had a great time. Yeah. Hopefully we'll be back real soon.
That's right. Part 2.
That's right. Part deuce. All right, guys. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.